Hello everyone, my name is Hannah Collison from Inspired Creations Surrey School of Sugarcraft, and today I'm going to show you how to make sea holly and berries. Here's a picture of the project. Beautiful spray to put onto a Christmas cake. And if you'd like to join in, then here is the kit list. And if you'd like, you can certainly get in touch with us and we will send you an email of this kit list. Okay, and here's the real life version of the spray, and it has the sea holly, the berries, and some little buds that I'm going to show you. The hydrangea here, which you can put in, they will look lovely. That's on a separate tutorial. So the first thing that needs to be made is the sea holly centre. We're going to tape 3 26 gauge wires that have been cut in half with white Stemtex tape. If you give the tape a bit of a stretch, that should release the glue and almost double the strip of tape in size. Gather your 3 half-length 26 gauge wires so they're in a trio, and go ahead and tape those wires together. Make sure you hold the tape at an angle so that as you turn the tape around the wire, it doesn't actually overlap it too much. So go all the way down with the tape and just break off the excess at the bottom if you have any. Pop a hook in. It's probably easier to do this by hand, just a small hook. And that should help anchor the centerpiece that you're going to attach. There's 2 ways to make the center. One is by hand using a pair of tweezers, and the other one is by using the mold. I'm going to show you the mold first. So I have a ball of sugar flour paste. I'm using Squire's Kitchen, and we're going to roll a ball about 1.5 centimeters diameter. Make sure that's nice and warmed up so there's no cracks in the ball. And then roll tightly between your palms, gradually releasing the pressure to reveal a crack-free ball. Put a reasonable amount of corn flour into the centre, the one you want to make. The centre actually has 3 different sizes. The medium and the large are quite nice. The small one is quite small. And some corn flour onto the ball. Give that a roll so you create a sausage. Something that is fat enough to go into here, but not so fat that it won't push right in. And then push in to the mould. Press it right down. And if you have any paste overlapping, go ahead and just turn that over so that it attaches onto the top of this part here. If you find you've got a mound, an excess amount of paste, then you can take a pair of scissors and cut to trim. Now, you can leave it in here to attach the hook, but you can easily remove this. You have to just be a bit careful, just kind of press against the sides of the mold and then gradually open. You'll see here that it has actually split. You don't want to press too hard. You don't want to pull too hard because it will split your vena. Having said that, is a little bit of an advantage to help it come out. And then gradually tease your shape out of the mold. The other way would be to I'm going to show you how to attach the wire using a burning method, but whilst your paste is still in your vena, your mold, you could actually warm up or heat your hook and plunge that in, as long as you don't make contact with the actual rubber. We don't want to melt it. And then it reveals your shape. Okay. Now, if you want to do that by hand, then what you can do is take the same quantity of paste, so 1.5 centimeters diameter as a ball, make it nice and crack-free. Roll it into a ball. And then into a sausage. And one end, just press it a little bit against the surface. So I'm just, if I show you that from an angle, I'm just holding it on the surface like so and just pressing down a little bit so we flatten and make it taper just a little bit so it's slightly narrower at the top end here. When you have made that center, it will end up being about 2 centimeters long and about 1.25 centimeters wide at the widest point, centimeter at the narrowest point here. Okay. This is a point where you'll need a lighted candle or a naked flame that you can actually set fire to the hooked end of your wire. Let it burn through just a little bit, and then after a few moments, push the hooked wire through to about 3/4 of the way. You then no longer want your flame unless you're making more of these. Now, to make the texture manually, simply take your tweezers and press in using the tip just to start to make indentations. Start at the top and then work your way around. Just try not to expose the wire. So you can hold your tweezers sideways or that way as well. Okay, whichever way. But just trying to make little pinched indents, nothing that's pulling it out too much. Now I have tried using a sieve or a tea strainer for this, or a cheese grater, but none of them are as effective as a pair of tweezers. If you've only got a flat-headed pair of tweezers, then just use the edge of them so you do get a point. And once you've gone all the way around, you take hold just to roll it a little bit so you press in some of the sharper indentations to reveal the texture. Here's a close-up. So if you're using the mold, you would still use the same burning method to attach the center to the wire. The next step is to make about 12 bracts that will surround the center of the sea holly. And they're made using the ridge on the board, or if you don't have a ridge board, then I'll show you how to make the center or these bracts manually. But using maybe the medium length ridge on your board, take a piece of paste, possibly about 1 centimeter in diameter. Give it a good warm up again, so it's crack free in a ball shape, and then roll a sausage. So you're kind of creating an elongated piece before you start. In terms of thickness, it's about 0.5 centimeter thick. Doesn't matter about the length because they can all be different sizes. It's quite nice to have a variation of bract sizes. So I'm just going to roll across or lengthwise along the board. So this will create the ridge. And the ridge is important because you need it as an insertion point for the wire. Carefully remove the rolled out piece of paste to reveal the ridge. If you need to, you can cut straight at the end just to take off any ruffled parts that have occurred as you tried to peel off your ridge. And then take a 28 gauge wire, making sure the wire is nice and straight. Take hold of the piece of paste and feed in to the center of the ridge. So as you push the wire in, this finger and thumb are pinching the ridge to help keep the wire in the center. And it also is feeling whether the wire is going to poke out or not. And if it feels like it's going to poke, out of the paste, you can just stop pushing, pull back a little bit, and then continue feeding if you've centralized it. The next step is to trim. So I've got a very long piece here, and I only want just a short amount that hasn't got any wire in, so probably about a centimetre at the end that hasn't got wire. The rest of it wants to be wired, otherwise it makes it very fragile. Take a very long pair of scissors, so just your normal kind of long, big craft scissors, and cut in a curve from the tip of the vein, your ridge, to the base. And I find it easy to turn it over to chop the other side. It's a little bit like when you cut your nails, you always find it easier to do one side than the other. So it looks like a long leaf or long petal. Drop that onto the surface of your board and take the sharp end of your veining tool rather than the fat end. So the sharp end, it's got a ridge on it. And that ridge line is going to be placed in the center of the shape, and just draw a line down the middle, avoiding cutting through the paste. Now we're ready to cut in the fronds. And the way I do that is by lining the scissors up. So these are the fine straight nail scissors, lining them up with the edge and then turning them in very slightly to cut little snips. So they start to look a bit feather-like. Once you've done that, then you can take it from the side and use your finger and thumb to curl. And we also want to cup it a little bit. So my finger and thumb are going to be balanced either side of the ridge at the back. So the ridge is at the back, showing at the back. And we kind of close this in, we cup it in a little bit. Don't want it too closed, but just enough so that it has a bit of a cup shape. Now you can do a selection of these different lengths, smaller ones, larger ones. I would recommend you make about 12 for one flower. Once you've made them all, you can let them dry before you go ahead and colour. One suggestion I have is that it's a good idea to bend the bract back a little bit just to help you with supporting while you colour. So I'm just going to clamp with the tweezers right where the wire has been inserted. So right up close to where the paste is. And then push backwards so it's bent at a 90-degree angle. So not only does that make it easier for you now to hold and support the flower petal or bract while you colour, it also means that you're now ready for this to go in to go around the centre. So I've got 3, 6, there's about 9 here. I've got a few more. And I'm going to show you how to colour. So I've got a tray of colour in here. It's a little bit messy now, but it has some cornflower blue. In the corner here, we have some pearl white and some moss green. So a combination of these 3 colours raw, so fully dark blue and green, and mixed with the pearl white, or you can just use white, will give a nice colour definition. If I show you again, we're trying to achieve something that's kind of bluey, pale bluey green with a little bit of pearlized white on there, or white. Now I'm going to colour these in sections. You could actually put the whole flower together before you go ahead and colour. I'm just going to show you each separate bract. If you take some of the blue on there first, so this is just the pure cornflower blue, and start at the base, over You can see how slippery this is, so you really need to support it underneath. But over dust the base here. And as you dust, bring the brush up through the center. And what you're doing is putting a concentrated amount of color down the bottom here. And then you're bringing that up through so you've got a nice deeper shade here. And I would recommend you do a little bit on the back as well. And do that on all your bracts before you're ready to assemble. Now, I should say, do that on all the bracts until once you've coloured them all blue, you can then go back and colour them all green and so on. But what you ideally you don't want to do is keep changing the same brush from one colour to the next. So if you are using the same brush, if you colour all the bracts first with the blue, and then you can clean your brush off just using the side of your kitchen towel. So I've just got this on a piece of kitchen towel. Run the brush up and down a few times to take the excess colour off the brush. And then you can go back and colour using the other shades. So here, if I was doing that, I would probably want to mix a little bit of my pearl white with my moss green to make a pale colour. And then catch some of that shading onto either side of the petal or bract. Petal bract, I don't mind what you call it, it's very difficult. I should decide really what I want to call it. And we'll just do a little bit on the back as well. You can make this as deep and dark as you like. It's entirely up to you. I think that's quite strong. It doesn't look very strong on the camera, but it is. We can do a little bit on the reverse as well. So you'd go ahead and you'd colour all of these bracts. Here's some I've made already, coloured already. And then you'd be ready to assemble. So here I am just adding a little bit more of a green shade, a little bit of pearlized white with the green just to make it more interesting. And I'm being quite liberal with the colour, but I have got a lens puffer here, which Passer, it's used for cameras. I think they just describe it as a camera lens puffer. I'm sure you can get them quite cheaply online, but they are perfect for blowing excess dust, because of course you don't want to blow your flowers, especially if you're going to be presenting them on a cake. So we're coming towards the end of colouring the bracts, and what I'm going to do is show you how to colour the centrepiece that we've made already. Ideally, all of this is better coloured once it's dry, but it is possible to colour as it's wet. Now, if you find as well when you're making the bracts that the paste keeps falling off the wire, then just put a touch of glue at the tip of the wire before you insert it into the paste, and then you will find that it should just hold. It will draw the glue through and it should hold the paste, certainly after a while anyway. So it's my last one now. As you can see, I've got lucky fingers, but it doesn't matter, we can wash that off. So it's just the last one as well, because your paste will be dry. Those fronds that you've cut, those little feather-like nicks, they're going to possibly break off, so just be a bit gentle when you're colouring. So that's all my bracts. Oh, I do need my colour still. Now what I'm going to do is just take a mix of the different shades and just support the back of the bracts at the centre, sorry, and go ahead and put the colour on. Okay, so just splashes of the green. You could take a little bit more of the blue. Just work the colour in. Just be a little mindful that you don't want this too strong, And, you know, less is more sometimes. This is coming up quite green. But if I put a little bit of the pearl white in areas as well, it'll just kind of dull it down a little bit. Do some at the base as well, just to make sure it's all covered. So I've got some plainer areas than others, but everything's got a little bit of some sort of dust on it. So I'm ready now to assemble. I have my center. I've got a strip of white tape, which is just half width. And you can start with whichever shape. They're quite random. So you don't need to worry about having long ones or short ones at any point. But you're just going to make one row to start with, and then you'll have a row behind. If your bends have been lost, just go ahead and do the bend so that your bracts are 90° to the wire. That's just going to make it much easier for you to seat each bract behind the center. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so once that's done, just pick any bract, it doesn't matter, pop the bract underneath so that the bend meets the main center wire. Take your tape, but tape down lower. Just one little press so that this one roughly stays on. You just want it to be a little bit hands-free. We're not taping right up here because it's going to agitate everything, and also it'll become very thick. So it's easier to tape down here. And then once you've got all your bracts placed, you can actually go ahead and tape upwards. So making sure you've got 90° bend, just insert the next one, taking care not to break the fronds that you've chopped in, that you've cut in with your scissors. Okay. So this first layer, they're all going to go beside each other. You can put more than one in if you feel that you can hold them. But just don't let them drop down. They need to be tight up here. Now I probably have to, this one might squeeze in, and then we're going to be going on to the next layer. So one little twist to get those in. So that's your first layer. They look quite nice like that, don't they? And then you can go in behind, but when you do, you want to go as high up as you can. So we don't want a gap. We don't want a gap. This needs to be tight up. Just work your way round, inserting as many as you like. Just keep an eye and see where you feel that you need. So if I've got a short one here, it makes sense to put a longer one behind it. They do have a habit of moving, but that's okay because we can pull them back into place where we need. Just get them in at this stage. And it's quite nice if you've got some short ones behind as well. It's all going to add to the profile. It's a very structural piece, this. So it's nice to see short ones and long ones. And the last one we're just going to pop in here. Okay. So now I've got them all fairly tight in there. Start to tape up. So I'm stretching the tape. I've got my finger behind and I'm pushing up. So each time I do a twist, I'm going up the center stem again. All the way as high as you can go without, you know, we just don't want to see a lot of wire here. So that's probably about right. Now, you can, if you wish, take each individual wire that's holding one of these bracts and give them a little tug. And as you tug them, move that tugged one out of the way. And what that's going to do is tighten the wires to where you've stopped taping. Just move them out of the way as you do. Just avoid pulling the central stem until you've tugged all the bracts, if you need to. So that's the last one. And now I'm going to bring all these, I'm just going to leave them there actually. You can then look in here and see whether or not there's a possibility of you pushing or pulling the central stem down a little. And it might be possible. So I'm just going to move the bracts out of the way. I'm just opening them up a little bit. And you can see I've got a center stem showing here. So if I very carefully hold on to the top here and tug the center stem, you should see it close up. So now it's nowhere near as spacey up here. Okay. Having done that, we're now ready to straighten all our wires. So get them all nice and neat again, and you can tape down. And as you do, just make sure that these wires don't spiral around the center stem. You want to try and keep them fairly straight and neat around that stem, so they look as natural as possible. The stem looks as natural as possible. And you don't need to trim any of those wires, because in real life, the sea holly has got quite a thick stem. And you'll notice there's some overwrapping here. And just to help that, I'm going to use this smooth surface that's plasticky just to rub the tool up and down. And that should take care of any twisting. And if you want to, if you just take a little bit of the petal dust onto your finger and rub the stem with the petal dust on your finger, then that will take on the white and it just gives it a bit more interest. And the last bit now is just to push some of the bracts up and some of them down, so that we have an interest from the side profile as much as we do from the top. If I look over the top here now as well, I can decide where I need to just adjust. You'll be able to tug them a little bit, but not massively. So just be careful when you do that, as they're quite fragile. So there we have our sea holly. That's quite pretty. So next is making the little snowberries. They're quite cute and actually quite easy to make. So you probably need about 10 per bundle of berries. And I would take a bundle of 28 gauge wires, or 33, and level them all off at the top and use your tweezers just to clamp right up the top here, right up close. And then you can turn all of the wires over, create a hook in all of them at the same time. You might just want to close them up just a fraction with your fingers, but that will just speed all the hook making. So the size of the berries, these are snowberries. You can make them any size, large or small. These ones here are just over 1/2 centimetre in diameter. And I'll take my piece of sugar flour paste, give it a good warm up so it's crack free. And then just take one of your hooked 28 gauge wires and push the unhooked end through the center of the ball. Feed it up so you're almost at the hooked end. And then using just a very small amount of sugar glue, just wet the head and pull the hook into the berry so you can just see it. And you would make all of these, I've got my ones here, in advance and let them dry. And once they're all dry, you can go ahead and assemble. You might find it easier to colour all the berries once they're put together. So I'm going to show you how to assemble them now. So we'll just take a little bit of tape, give it a stretch so that the glue comes out of the tape. Just makes the tape tacky. And we're going to start by adding one berry to another. So we've got the smallest berry here, then we take a second smallest. Ideally, all the berries should be the same size, but if they are different in size, then start with the smallest and work up to the largest. It just makes it look more real. And we're just going to line up this top of the second berry to about halfway on the first berry. Okay, so there's going to get, we're going to make a kind of a strip of these. And the idea is to maybe have one on the left, one in the middle, one on the right as you go down, remembering that you're positioning the new berry halfway up the old berry, the one you've just put on. And go up in size. So halfway. Just keep adding until you've got to the point where you're at the bottom. So if you want to as well, you can use your nail just to bend the berry at an angle. That might help you position. I've got 3, 6, 8 on here. That looks quite nice. It's a nice little sprig. And once you've got them all together, you can go ahead and tape down the stem. And we can bend these a little bit so they're slightly curved. I've added some cornflower blue and I have some pearlized white, or you could just use white. What I'm going to do is just part the berries just a little bit. Because they're dry, you should be able to do this without the balls falling off. Just be careful if they are a little bit on the wet side. So just part them out of each other's way. And then let me take a little bit of the pearlized white and dust from the top down. The idea is to make them look a little bit frosty. And again, don't worry if there's a lot of loose colour on here, because you can use your lens puffer to blow off the excess. You just need to be a bit careful that you haven't got lots of loose excess before you add it onto a cake. Otherwise, that could end up falling onto your cake, which won't be very pretty. Take a little bit of the blue and white together. And now I'm going to very carefully brush from the base up. And the idea is just to concentrate the colour. Catch a little bit of the colour on the stem as well. And if you want to, you can go a little bit darker. It's always a bit scary to do that first of all. So I tend to be a bit careful, but a bit conservative with my colouring. And then as I get more confident with what I'm making, as I can see it coming together, I can add more. And we can bring some of that blue blush up the sides of the berries now. Maybe they're more blue on one side than the other. depends which side's caught the sun. And again, this is my take on the berry just for this particular spray. So of course, snowberries are white, and they're a bit, they've got a bit of pearly colour in them, so they're, you know, a bit of pearlized white in them would look quite nice just on their own, on its own. Okay, so I've just got some blue on there. Now, to give it a bit more interest, I'm going to put a little bit of rejuvenating spirit, or you can use gin or vodka, a clear alcohol. Just need a drop. And a fine brush, if I just wet the brush and just take some of this blue colour that I've got left over and mix so it's a little bit like watercolour. Just make sure you've got a strong enough mix here to paint. If I twist my brush to make it come to a point, and then supporting my hand whilst I paint, I'm just going to lay the brush onto the end where you can still see the wire. So of course, if these berries are nice and red, you could paint this bit black and then it would look a bit more interesting and more holly berry like. Okay. If you need to overpaint for any reason and you need to let those dots dry first, otherwise the colour will lift. And I'm just going back into my dry petal dust colour because I feel like I want to add a little bit more blue in places. And that's the beauty of this. You can keep coming back and adding more if you need. Okay, and I've just got my little puffer here, and all I'm going to do is squeeze it, and that will, I'm just going to take that off screen just so it doesn't go all over, but you just puff around and that will take the colour off, any excess powder off. So having coloured, I can now bring these all back into how I want them. So just closing them up a little bit. And there's your berries. So the next step is to make these little buds. I'm just going to do one sprig, show you how that's made. So for the buds, you're going to use 28 gauge wire again, probably about 10 on one sprig. You can make as many as you like to go in your arrangement. And I've used the tweezers to put a hook in the end of multiple 28 gauge wires just to speed things up. But this time, each hook, you need to just close it up a little bit so that it does anchor into the bud, but isn't too big for the bud center. Now the paste, you really only need a small amount. It's probably the equivalent of a pip-sized ball. Okay, and depending on, I mean, you can make them as large as you like, but I like to make small ones and large ones. So this one is not even 3 mil. Okay. The other thing to remember on this is that the paste does dry, so there's no point in breaking off these pieces and leaving them on the side and just working with them when you're ready. You're better off breaking and working and creating in one go. So you've got your hook on the 28 gauge wire. What we're going to do is push the wire through like you did the berries. So these would be mini berries. I'm not going to put glue on here because my paste is quite soft. Push your ball, sorry, push the hook of the wire through into the ball. So it's almost disappeared. And then between your finger and thumb, pinch the top and twiddle, and that will make it come to a point. So you've embedded the hooked wire right inside. Now you can make the hole, the lines, just by using the small end of a cutting wheel. And we're going to just place the cutting wheel about halfway point and push in and draw upwards. So you're coming off the point. And what that'll do is cut in some grooves which would represent the opening of petals at some point, or the calyx opening, and there'll be a flower inside. If they're so small, you don't always have to make the lines. So I'm just going to make another couple for you just so you can see. So if you remember, we're going to take a hooked 28 gauge wire. The hook is too wide, too open at the moment, so just press it to close it a fraction. Doesn't have to be fully closed. Make sure that your paste is nice and warmed up. A small pip-sized ball of paste, and these can go up in size as you make them. Embed the wire into the ball, and then between your fingers, pinch the top, and then twiddle once or twice to make it come to a point. It's actually the easiest way to get a piece of paste to go into a wire. If you prefer, rather than using the cutting wheel, you can use the sharp end of your veining tool and just simply draw upwards. Again, exactly the same motion to cut through your little line indentations. I'm just holding this a little bit closer to see whether it will pick up the detail. Hopefully it will focus. Possibly. Okay, so I'd make about 10 of these, which I've done here. Got quite a few, and it is easier if you let these dry. And then you're ready to assemble. Just make sure any loose excess paste you've got, put it under cover, put it in a bag so it doesn't dry out. And then if you take some tape, and once again, we're ready to assemble. I would probably recommend to assemble these before you colour. So we'll just take a little strip of your half width white Stemtex tape. Go ahead and find the smallest little bud. And then you start to put together, but this time we leave a little bit of distance between the top and the next one, a little bit more. So maybe positioning them just underneath each other. But we also want to have them coming centre and left and right, just so that it gives some interest. I'm going to start my taping a little bit lower down on this one. And as you tape, just add in more. Because we want this to have a little bit more distance on the stem. It's probably between 1/2 centimetre and 1 centimetre as you go down. They can be longer as you go down as well, if you like. Now, normally I pre-tape the stems of each of my flowers or buds, but in this instance, I like the idea that you've got this exposed wire, and because it's white, it looks even more interesting. But again, that's the fantasy side of this. So in real life, it's likely that these buds would have green stems, or if they're autumnal, if they're left, they could be red or brown. And once you've added all of those in, you can go ahead and tape the stem down. And you can see if I just curl these, I can curl this whole main stem a little bit. You can see how they're spaced out. And then you can colour. So these ones I want to be quite careful with. I'm just going to really add a little bit of green. So I'll bring in my colour. And my brush is a little bit bluey, but I'm not too worried about that, because if I just go into the green, if anything, it's going to give it more of a eucalyptus look, which is quite interesting as well. So we're just going to brush the stems and the base of the buds. And you can decide, but you could actually leave the tips of the buds white. Just whatever suits your colour scheme. There's really no right or wrong to this. I'll put a little bit of pale green on the tips. A little bit of colour on there, not too much. We can always, as a spray, I can always add a little bit, and I might do. We'll have a look and see. So the final step is to show you how to put the 3 pieces together. So again, I'm just going to take a little bit of my white Stemtex tape, give it a good stretch, and start with the finest item, which is actually my set of buds. Adding in the slightly broader, fatter, less delicate buds, berries, And we can position those so that this gives it a bit of length. So just putting it in, just looks like it fits there quite nicely. Give it a press where you're going to tape just so it starts to stick together, and then you can go ahead and give it a twist of tape. Just a few twists because you're going to be adding in the sea holly next. And then with the sea holly, it's actually easier if you bend the stem to start with. So I normally bend about 1 inch down. Just use your finger now. You can use tweezers, but it's actually very difficult when the stem's that thick. And then we're going to drop or should we say place about there. So it's probably about 2 inches from where the berries have gone in, but have a look to see what that looks like when you once you put it together. So that looks quite nice. Okay, so you've got your buds, then your berries come in, leave a distance, and you've bent this, so it's giving it some height. If you don't bend this, if you tape it in tight, it's going to look too strangled. So that looks about right. We can go ahead and tape that part in as well. So just position your tape, keep it at an angle so you're not overlapping all the time. Keep it as neat as you possibly can. And any excess stem I normally leave, and I don't trim this until I know that I'm finished with my arrangement. And then I'm going to get my nails into those joins just to neaten this area up. And something shiny, something smooth to rub, which will hide some of that wrapping round of tape. There we have our little sprig sea holly berries and buds. Let's put that on a better display surface. There we go, so you can see it a bit more detail. You can see the sea holly is just really structural and beautiful from the sides as well. And if you wanted to, you could catch a little bit of blue on the top edge, or you could embellish the other pieces, the other creations with darker shades, whatever suits your plan and your arrangements. So I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial, and if you've got any questions, feel free to send me an email, hannah@inspiredcreations.uk.com, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. I'll say bye-bye for now.